much for joining us. This is truly exciting to be here with you. My name is Shai Ganu. I look after Willis Towers Watson's global executive compensation practice and the talent and rewards business for ASEAN and South Asia. With me is my colleague and dear friend Vidisha Mehta, who leads our talent and rewards business for Singapore. We're truly humbled here to be with you today to share the report launch of a project that we've been working with IHRP and MOM for the past year, titled The Study on the Impact of Technology on HR, Jobs and Skills. It is truly exciting and humbling being here and almost a culmination of a year's worth of work. This was almost a passion project for us, 8 colleagues of us working almost full-time. So a special shout out to a few of my colleagues, Shuchi Tyagi, Jillian Tan, Ben Chua, in particular for all the work that they've done. And in the next 20-25 minutes, we wanted to share with you some of the key themes and outcomes that came from the study. But to give you a little sense about the study itself, the study was a culmination of the Institute of Human Resources Professional, IHRP, and the Ministry of Manpower, MOM, jointly commissioned Willis Towers Watson to study the impact of technology on human resources sector in Singapore, and specifically focusing on the changes to jobs and skills in the sector. The study focused on a 3 to 5 year timeline to analyze the impact in detail and identify actions to help shape the future of HR sector in Singapore. We have also taken a slightly longer term futurist view, thinking about what HR function would look like in 5 years from now or after 5 years from now. And we'll share that with you towards the end of the session. But without further ado, moving to the next slide, the study aims to understand the impact of technology on HR over the next 3 to 5 years. And broadly, we took 3 steps to undertake this exercise. So step 1 was to analyze global and local technology trends and the impact the HR function would experience in the next 3 to 5 years. The intended outcome was that to build awareness of technology trends in HR. Step 2 was to identify the impact of technology on current HR jobs and tasks in the Singapore context. And here, the main outcome we were hoping was to redesign HR jobs with the intent of driving value creation. And step 3 is to identify emerging skills to elevate HR capabilities. The intent was to empower HR with new skills for greater business impact. And all of this, if you think about what were the outcomes that we wanted to get from this overall study, there were 2 broad themes that sort of we're putting in this bucket of HR responsibilities. So on the one hand, very much we see this exercise as equipping HR and giving HR the skills, the tools to drive business transformation and productivity. But to do this, it's important that HR also elevates its own capabilities. So we're hoping that this will become a virtuous cycle. Sort of HR elevates its capabilities that allows it to drive business transformation and productivity. And by driving business transformation and productivity, it will get more funding from the business to be able to make positive change. So before we move on, I just also wanted to highlight at this juncture, the study aimed to answer 3 broad questions. Number 1, what technologies will impact HR in the future? Number 2, how jobs will change, and particularly jobs and tasks that will be displaced, those will be augmented, and the jobs that will emerge. And number 3, which skills will be critical to perform these jobs, particularly the technology-related skills that HR professionals will require to perform the jobs in the future. And a study ends on a actually very optimistic note that technology will definitely change the current state of HR considerably, but it will also provide HR significant opportunity to deliver higher value to the business by leading the strategic people agenda while improving HR service delivery. So with that sort of backdrop, maybe just quickly walking you through on the next slide, how we conducted this study. As I mentioned earlier on, we almost had 8 of our colleagues working full-time on this, and very strong partnership with IHRP and MOM. So thank you to their teams as well. There were 3 broad phases looking at a landscape review. So what's out there in the market, looking at analysis and insights. So things such as key trends in technology, impact of jobs and tasks, emerging skills and job adjacencies, but then also a strong focus on validation. So whatever we designed, we made sure there was strong validation from the business community, from the HR community. And to give you a little perspective, our research and sort of this engagement, we reached out to more than 350 business leaders, HR leaders across the ecosystem. We interviewed more than 60 business leaders, including board chairs and CEOs, HR leaders, HR technology leaders. We did sort of focus groups with different HR technology partners, global studies like Willis Towers Watson's partnership with the World Economic Forum, with SHRM, with the HR 4.0 study, validation sessions, surveys, and very interestingly, we also applied technology in this project itself. So practicing what we preach, we applied a lot of web scraping, natural language processing, and AI tools to look at what are the emerging and declining skills. We'll talk about more of that later on, but maybe moving on, just wanting to, on slide 4, set the theme about globally rapid technology changes are transforming the world of work, but it's important to also look at this in a COVID-19 lens, which has led to greater expectations from HR. So just if we click through the emerging Robogig economy, clearly sort of we're looking at this interposition of robots and people. There's a joke that sort of we discuss internally within Willis Towers Watson. We started referring to HR as human plus robotics, HR, but clearly a robo sort of human interface, which will be important going forward. Automation is going to be pervasive in all organizations. You'll have a greater emphasis on non-employee talent, a lot more focus on redesigning jobs to be done by employees with higher skills, and thus optimizing the workforce needed in the future. And that's the exciting part. But then also looking at changes that will be caused through this. It is very important to note that the anxiety it may cause in the workforce, our research suggests that actually 2 in 5 employees feel that these technology changes will cause them anxiety. Either perceived loss of risk or loss of or concerns around loss of jobs. And COVID-19 pandemic presents HR with both the challenges and opportunities to manage employee health and engagement and productivity, reconfigure workflows, consider strategic manpower costs, reskill and redeploy work, but fundamentally think about a new ways of working. Vidisha will talk about this later on, but one of Willis Towers Watson's proprietary methodologies we've applied to this project around reinventing jobs, where we break down every job into component tasks, look at which tasks can be automated, augmented, substituted, and rebuild the jobs back up to be higher value adding jobs. And in that backdrop on slide 5, very quickly, I'll share with you, according to Willis Towers Watson's global research, and we conducted this research with the World Economic Forum in a paper titled HR 4.0. Very recently, Willis Towers Watson engaged with the World Economic Forum on a new sort of thought leadership piece titled Human Capital as an Asset. We've also engaged with SHRM and some other industry bodies. And these 5 themes clearly are the trends that define a new expectation for the HR profession. I'll cover these very quickly. Number 1, pushing boundaries to power organizational agility, where HR is an architect for the organization's vision of the future while steadying its foundation. Number 2, unleashing digital enablement, accelerating digital enablement for the business and for HR as well. Number 3, embracing perpetual work reinvention. So almost thinking about optimal combinations of human and automation and a shared commitment to continuous learning. Number 4, rethinking culture and leadership. So shaping a culture that empowers leadership at the edges in an inclusive work ecosystem. And number 5, elevate HR decision science with a specific emphasis of combining data and decision science to spark future-focused insights and human-centered innovation. One of my clients, CEO of a very large organization in Singapore here, he uses this line, which has stuck with us and sort of almost become a war cry for us. He uses this theme saying, don't tell me your hunch, show me the data. And that sort of theme we want to start applying in all HR decision science. And this is a nice call to action for HR decision science. Let's convert our hunches and insights into data and analytics. So with that backdrop, maybe just focusing gears or shifting gears a bit on slide 6 to Singapore. So beyond technology, Singapore's economic and demographic shifts have significant implications for the workforce. As we all know, sort of we're going through significant economic restructuring. A lot of this also was in place pre-COVID, but has been sort of accelerated with COVID. Industry transformation maps, a focus on digitalization, productivity, internationalization, innovation, of course, underpinned by a strong tripartism that is very a prominent feature in Singapore. Um, Demographic shifts, so also looking at Singapore population, aging population, a multi-generational and diverse workforce, but specific lens on what do we do with older workers, what do we do with increasing retirement age, with people being in the workforce for a longer time, how do you focus on upskilling and reskilling some of our senior workers? And sort of all of that then looks at strong implications of the workforce for businesses, which come down to four basic themes: redesigning jobs for efficiency, greater value add, and needs for vulnerable workers; strategic workforce planning to ensure right capabilities; constant workforce upskilling and reskilling; and redeploying talent to value added jobs and growth areas. So this Singapore backdrop, we then sort of in our research for this project, it sort of highlighted the need for HR to reinvent itself to be a value creator. So if you think about the role of HR, and maybe we'll just click through this very quickly, business leaders expect value creation from HR. HR leaders recognize the need for new capabilities in HR, and technology will be a key enabler in all of this equation. And we'll talk more about this later on, but just to give you a small anecdote, I mentioned earlier on that as part of this project, we engaged with business leaders, with CEOs, with CXOs, with even board chairs. And this one chairman of a very large listed company here in Singapore, he used an analogy that has, again, stuck with us. He said that any CEO has three trusted lieutenants, so to speak. The CFO, and he defined the CFO as the value preserver, because the CFO makes sure that the books are in order so that we're preserving value. He described the head of sales as the value multiplier, because if you think about the head of sales or head of marketing, you have products and services, you sell that to as many customers as possible for the best possible price. So that's a value multiplier. But he used a very interesting phrase to define HR. And he used that phrase saying, we expect HR to be a value creator. And we thought that was very interesting. And when we probed that, his point was HR needs to define the values, the culture of the organization. HR needs to define what work is, how work gets done, what performance is important, what behaviors and outcomes get rewarded, and think about uplifting the entire organizational capability with a very strong lens on behavioral science to drive the right organizational behaviors. And sort of that theme around HR being value creator, we thought was a very strong and powerful one. So putting that in backdrop then on slide 8, where technology advancement in intelligent automation, consumer grade applications, and predictive analytics will engage HR to focus on strategic issues. We then, as part of this research, we found three broad themes when it came to technology. Number one is around intelligent automation, and specifically looking at RPA, robotic process automation, AI, social robotics, machine learning technologies. Number two, consumer grade applications. So a growing demand from clients, i.e. all employees, for having user-friendly, mobile-savvy, mobile-compatible applications. So designing consumer-grade experience and mobile-first HR processes become important. And number three, looking at predictive analytics and modeling, where technology has enabled collection, storage, of access of data, leading to real-time data collection, predictive analytics, and sort of adding value to the business. Conscious of time, I know I quickly ran through some of the process and some of the themes behind this, but I'll hand over to Vidisha to then take us through the meat of our study and meat of our findings. Vidisha?
Thank you so much, Shai. And as we move from these three broad themes, what we find is that the results of our study follow the two perspectives that we had talked about earlier in this session. From a business transformation perspective, we are seeing that HR is expected to do a few things that is going to impact the entire workforce of the organization. The first amongst these is really about redesigning jobs, particularly with work from home becoming more of the norm as a result of COVID. This has accelerated the trend towards job redesign so that people are able to work longer and they're able to do some of the more higher value added jobs and some of the lower value added jobs can actually get automated. This also drives workforce planning from a perspective of building key capabilities within the organization. And that drives us to the second theme of continuous upskilling and reskilling. We see this become absolutely critical as a result of the recent changes and the acceleration in technology. And hence the implication has been that there is an expectation to move from content creation within L&D to content curation, because there is a lot of high quality content that's now available. The second big change that we find is really in terms of the delivery of content, which is now moving to more and more technology enabled platforms so that large scale upskilling and reskilling exercises can be undertaken. Finally, the impact of consumer grade applications is really huge as employees start having a higher level of expectation. They don't want to see experiencing a Facebook and a Google in their private lives and then stepping into the organization and going 10 years back with enterprise applications. So there has been an increased focus of mobile first development and enhancing the user experience as far as all these applications is concerned. To be able to deliver these themes and these expectations to the workforce and to the business, HR needs to build its own functional capabilities. A big part of which is around digitalization of HR processes so that there is an infrastructure in place to deliver a lot of these consumer grade expectations and this technology enabled programs. The second aspect that has become critical is around the use of data. Data has been around for a long time, and the HR function has moved from reporting to now insights and analysis. And increasingly, we're seeing more and more sophisticated analysis, including physical predictive analytics coming in as far as data is concerned. Now, in addition to these 5 themes, as a result of COVID, there are a few immediate things that have become really critical and new expectations from the HR function, so to speak. As the pandemic hit us, the immediate expectations were in terms of workforce and workplace safety, putting in place employee well-being programs, but also enabling the shift to remote work almost overnight. In fact, one of our clients in Singapore moved from about a 20% support of remote work to close to 80% support of remote work in a space of 4 weeks, which actually involved supplying or sending desktops to people's houses. Now, as some of these immediate needs are met and organizations move along, the focus now is on business continuity and sustainable operations and getting people back and making sure that they are engaged, they have the right skills to build up businesses and to reopen businesses in a sustainable manner. In addition to these new expectations, there is, of course, an enhancement of the 5 themes that we spoke about. With job redesign, a big element that's come in now is about responsible automation, understanding how do we phase automation and what do we use it for? And increasingly, the focus is now on using automation to augment human work rather than substitute humans in jobs. New skills continue to be the focus, and consumer grade applications become even more important as more and more employees continue to work remotely. Now, this is obviously enabled by accelerated technology deployment. So we are seeing that, with reduced physical presence, a lot of the HR technology plans are getting accelerated. And this is now resulting in more and more data being available through the various applications to the HR function. And this data, started with things like disclosure of personal travel plans from a safety perspective. They've also gone into now a lot of companies thinking about what is almost called employee surveillance type of activities to see what kind of work people are doing and what is the impact of productivity. And this raises some concerns on, the trust that we place within our employees, as well as, what we're doing with employee data from the perspective of, data privacy and the rights that employees have to their own data. With all of these changes that are coming across, the way HR operates and the way it delivers its services is also changing. We've seen the three-legged model, and that's existed for a very long time now. The shift now that's emerging is really with the silos of centers of expertise, or COEs, beginning to break. And that's changing to more agile project-based teams where people almost come together from different functional areas to be able to solve a problem which is multidisciplinary in nature. And we've given an example here of productivity and agility as a theme, and you can see how there are different aspects to that problem. The intent with these agile resource pools is that once that particular issue is solved, these teams actually disband and they might come together in a different configuration to solve another issue. The fundamental outcome of this process is that we need more multidisciplinary professionals within HR to be able to see the interconnections across the different functional areas, as well as the implications on the consumer or the employee experience. And that's the reason why we're seeing more and more breadth being developed, or the T-shaped professional who has an understanding of multiple areas within HR in terms of functional aspects, as well as depth in one area in terms of deep functional expertise. Now, this is not something that is uniform across the board. It depends on the size of the HR organization. It depends on the maturity of the HR function. But in some shape and form, we are seeing this trend emerging across the HR operating model. And the reason for that is because technology trends are actually impacting jobs across every single function within HR. Right from business partners who now need to conceptualize work architecture and redesign jobs, and think about workforce planning from an ongoing perspective, all the way to upskilling and reskilling, and the learning function needing to think about technology-enabled delivery, and every single HR function being affected by this consumer-grade experience that needs to get developed. So all the programs that get designed within the HR function need to now get delivered through this high quality employee experience. And that is getting enabled by a very strong platform and infrastructure as far as HR technology is concerned. And therefore you see that playing out not just from an infrastructure perspective, but also increased efficiency in service delivery, particularly in transaction processing, where there's more and more automation that's coming in. Now, with technology coming into every function in HR, with these consumer grade experiences, there is a tremendous amount of data that is being generated in different parts of the HR function. And new aspects that come out are really around how some of this data can be analyzed and how we can make high quality and unbiased decisions within HR. Because as we see, the more AI, the more technology that is being used, the risk of perpetuating, biases is very real. And hence you find new considerations coming up in terms of making sure that we are making the right decisions to improve diversity within our organizations. With that, you will find that certain, jobs will get optimized, or certain tasks will go away and certain new tasks will come in as a result of all of these trends that we see across the HR function. So what we did was, we used our Willis Towers Watson Reinventing Jobs methodology to assess every single role. And what we found is that as you take an HR job and break it up into its constituent tasks, you're able to understand the automation potential and what the role of automation is for each of those tasks. And we carried out this detailed analysis across 27 jobs and close to 500 tasks within HR. And what we found is certain tasks are really suitable for large-scale automation. And these are typically transaction processing jobs where technology is a great substitute. Whether that is, a simple tool like RPA, which allows, routine or rules-based transaction processing, or you have, cognitive automation like AI or machine learning, which allows for more sophisticated applications like CV screening, or a particular application of AI in, social robotics or chatbots, which allow for, basic query handling. And as these jobs go away, or as these tasks get more and more automated, what you find is that technology also creates new jobs. So it's quite exciting to see that in the last year or so, we have seen an increase in jobs like HR data analyst. So this is a specialist role that thinks about the data architecture and the warehousing at the back end, but also thinks about what kind of models do we use for sophisticated predictive analytics, or a learning designer who brings in instructional design along with really high quality skills in user experience and user interface design. And in addition, we find some very technology specific roles, or roles to monitor bots or AIs, or moderate the results or analysis that AI comes up with, or AI trainer type of roles that we're seeing increasingly within HR. In addition to these specialist roles, we're also seeing some cross-functional roles. For example, the people strategist role, which is bringing in capabilities from strategic workforce planning, along with the traditional talent management and learning and development kind of activities. So with all of these new jobs coming in and some jobs going away, we carried out a deep analysis of the HR landscape. And we looked at the 27 jobs that are part of the HR skills framework. And each of these jobs was analyzed in detail to understand what is the impact of technology and how the job would change as a result of these technology implications. Now, we found that 8 jobs will be significantly impacted by the use of technology. And not surprisingly, these are jobs which are currently heavily involved in routine transaction processing. And what you can see is that a lot of that part gets substituted by automation, but there are new expectations and the jobs expected to move up the value chain, so to speak, and think about, and have skills about user experience design, user interface design, to be able to meet the new requirements and expectations of the job. Not surprisingly, a large number of jobs, 16 of 27, are moderately impacted by technology, which means that the delivery of the work that they do is hugely augmented by the use of technology. And that could be because basic aspects of the job are automated, or because there is an increased amount of sophisticated data that's being made available to be able to make decisions. And therefore, capabilities here are really upgraded in terms of strategic business advisory, work architecture, job redesign, and other such areas. And finally, we have a set of jobs that we are calling low impact jobs. Now, this is not to say that they will not be impacted by technology, but that some of the core skills that are required for the job, we don't see a huge change as far as those critical capabilities are concerned. Now, for each of these 27 jobs in the report, we have a detailed analysis that actually covers how the job's done today, how is it going to be done in 3 years' time, what technology will be available, and how will that enable carrying out of the activities. And we've also identified a whole set of new skills that will be required for these roles in future. In addition to this analysis, we did zoom in on the high impact roles, the 8 high impact roles, to say what are the possible job adjacencies or deployment options for these roles. And when we look at deployment options, the starting point for us was really to look at overlapping skills. And we looked at those 8 origin roles, HR roles, and we said, what kind of destination roles can they move to as a result of a set of overlapping skills? And those destination roles could be within or outside HR. From this basic analysis, we refined it further with real life transitions. So we analyzed transitions, career transitions over a 6-month period. And we looked at many tens of thousands of transitions to identify which of these theoretical transitions were actually successful, again, within as well as outside HR. And finally, we refined this further by analyzing the destination roles. Because at the end of the day, if you have an administrative HR job that is going to get automated and you think you can move the person to a customer service job, the reality is that job will also be getting automated. So we wanted to look at jobs that were not at risk of displacement. And finally, this set of jobs was discussed with the industry to focus on, the kind of the kind of skills top up that would be required for people to be able to make these moves. What came out as an interesting finding was that the skill top up required to move into these roles was actually lesser than skill top ups required to stay within HR and to move to the higher value added roles or higher value added activities within HR. So let's zoom in very quickly and take a look at these skills. And we're not going to talk about each of these in detail in this session because there are over 40 skills. But what we can see is that a few of these cut across functional areas, things like analytics, and not just simple analytics, but also using data from disparate sources to link it together and build a comparing story or a business case to be able to make decisions. Needless to say, HR technology adoption is critical to be able to do any of this analysis. As we dive into the functions, we find an even more interesting pattern. This erstwhile shared services role has now evolved significantly, and you can see that the capabilities are almost like that of an IT function, with significant capabilities required in API design, on data architecture design, etc. With the HRBP role, like I said earlier, it's more around advisory, being able to make decisions based on data. And then as we go into the specialist functions, you find areas that are relevant to that function, like the talent experience design or the candidate experience design with talent attraction, personalized career journey development for talent management, and so on for each of the functions within HR. What we have in the report is a very detailed description of these skills, and they are actually defined at 4 proficiency levels, so that as people get onto the journey of building these capabilities, they're clear about the expectations and the understanding that is required within each of these skill areas as you move along in your journey. Now, the report actually has a lot of data. There's a lot of detail. Our intent was really to, spark off the transformation and to accelerate the transformation of HR to support, some of the business transformation that we're seeing today. And needless to say, there are several stakeholders that are critical in this process. Business leaders are realizing more and more that investments in HR technology are critical, and there is more appetite around these investments as a result of the pandemic. But at the same time, HR leaders have a huge role to play, not just driving the workforce transformation across their organizations, but also building a compelling employee proposition as people think more and more about the purpose of why they come to work and how they contribute to the communities and to society. And finally, it's about building the capabilities of the HR function and of HR professionals. But I think in all of this, one of the most important aspects of the equation is you and I and each and every one of us as HR professionals. Because at the end of the day, we've been talking for a long time about HR having a seat at the table and making those strategic or helping our business leaders make strategic decisions. With the result of so much technology coming in, a lot of our administrative activities, which used to take up a lot of time, those are going away or those are getting automated, which leaves bandwidth available for us as HR professionals to be able to step up and actually do more of that strategic business advisory, which is what we've been wanting to do for a very long time too. So I'm very excited by the outcomes of this study personally as an HR professional. And I hope you are too. And I hope this can help you in your journey, in your own personal transformation journey. That's pretty much what we had to share with you. We'd be very happy to take any questions if you have. We have a few questions that have been coming in on the chat. So, maybe let me just start off with that. And, that should kind of help us get warmed up. So the first question, and Shai, do feel free to jump in. I think a very interesting question that we had was around, the fact that there's so much technology coming into HR is great and it's truly transforming the landscape. But what does that mean in terms of the personal connect and in terms of, not losing that sense of empathy, which is really critical as far as the HR function is concerned? And it's a great question because, at the end of the day, all of this technology, what it is enabling is that some of those things that would be extremely time consuming and not very value adding, basic transaction processing, basic query handling, it's those activities which can get optimized through technology enabled delivery. And therefore, actually what ends up happening is that there is increased bandwidth to be able to have meaningful conversations, to use higher quality data and insights to advise business leaders, to kind of make sure that the bandwidth is available to be able to have more meaningful conversations and build that personal connect and empathy. So it is very much about using technology to augment work rather than using technology to really replace the HR function or any HR roles. Right.
Indeed, and I seem to have just hit a little bit of a technology snack, so I can't see all the questions coming up. But very much it is about that augmenting experiences. So Vidisha, sorry, I can't see the questions here. So if you just want to read a couple of those out, then happy to jump in as well.
Sure, absolutely. I think we have a lot of questions around the slide deck. And yes, we are more than happy to share the slide deck. We will just check in with the conference organizers to see what's the best way to make that happen. And yes, we know the fonts are really small. There's a lot of data. Just to give you a sense of timeline, this report, this is really the official launch of the report. And you would have heard Senior Minister of State Zaki talk about it just before our session. And we are very excited about it. The full report will be available on various websites, for sure on IHRP's website, on Willis Towers Watson's website, and that should be available in a few days from now. And that's pretty much, not to scare you off, it's a 200+ page report. The key content of it is really the first, I'd say 40 or so pages where you can get all of this detailed data on trends, on how this is impacting jobs and how jobs are changing. The rest of the information is actually there so that you're able to deep dive into each role and see how your role is changing, or maybe how somebody on your team's role is changing. So that's as far as the report timeline is concerned. Great question on, what do HR leaders need to do today to get their business leaders to prioritize investments in HR tech in the current climate? Shai, do you want to give, take that, and I'll probably jump in after that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we always love questions about business cases. And this is not too different, I guess, from how you would make any other business case or how you make a business case for a financial investment or a capital investment. I think there is no silver bullet here. So each organization and each person has their own experience. But what we've seen work is sort of a very structured process about making your business case. And it starts with your investment hypothesis, saying if we invest X dollars, this would be the expected return. Making that hypothesis in a very compelling argument. And the compelling argument could be either around efficiency or effectiveness or reduction of errors or sort of upskilling employees, because a lot of what investments that you would be making in HR technology is also about reinventing the job so that people get more joy from their jobs and they're not doing the administrative, repetitive tasks. Those can get automated, those can get substituted, but what human beings then focus on is more of the value-adding tasks. Sort of going back to that process, build your investment hypothesis, show your expected ROI, but then also experiment. And this notion of experimentation, which is very common in data science, this notion of experimentation, which is very common in customer and consumer analytics, it's not as prevalent in HR analytics or in HR technology adoption. Experiment, try a few pilots, try a few employees, try a few sites, and see if this works or not. And when it works, I think it makes for a far more compelling reason to make a business case for a larger investment. And again, like I said, there is, from our experience, no silver bullet about how you get business leaders to cut you a check. But it goes back to this earlier notion about value creator. If HR is a value creator, we need to define what that value is, experiment, prove success, prove ROI, and then ask for bigger, better dollars. I don't know, Vidisha, if you had anything else to add.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what we spoke about in terms of the operating model and, moving into agile resource pools, the very, model of working with agile type of projects is really about saying you can start small. You can actually, go with a single group, a single department, or even pilot within a single location. The idea is to kind of prove or have some early wins, because it excites people more than a story of a success in the first place, and that helps get a lot of dollars in as far as the investment is concerned. There's another great question about benchmarking. Should we start looking into benchmarking for technology deployment in HR functions? It's a great question, and I would be tempted to say yes, but I'd say it depends, because it really depends on what the priorities for the business are, and what might work for one organization may not work for another. And it's linked up to a question that we get very frequently about saying, look, I'm a medium-sized organization, or I'm a small organization. I don't even have this whole operating model and all of these resources. And so how do I prioritize my HR technology investments? I think that's key. The roadmap and the kind of plan that Shai was talking about, it's very dependent on what the business's technology deployment plans are, and how the business is going to be making money. And therefore you have low cost options. I mean, there are multiple point solutions that are available today in a cloud-based model that you can pick up even with 100 users or 100 employees in your organization, and they're pretty cost effective. So you don't need to be thinking about a massive, HRMS multi-module, multi-year type of deployment anymore. And therefore the ability to evaluate HR technology. So nowhere are we saying that all HR people need to turn into engineers. But what is really critical is the ability to evaluate that HR technology to see whether it's going to be useful to your business, and how it's going to integrate with other pieces of technology that you might have. And that's in terms of both data flow, because you don't want a bad user experience. You don't want your employees having to type in the same details over and over again. At the same time, you need to be thinking about what kind of analytics and insights will that particular tool give you. So the ability to kind of do that will kind of drive the business case that you make and the degree of technology deployment that you have. So we'd probably say it's a little early to start benchmarking. What is really critical is to say, do we have an HR technology roadmap? The very fact that we have one, that we are thinking about potentially a phased deployment, and we are thinking about interlinkages when it comes to both application integration, as it's called, as well as the data linkages. That's really going to be evidence enough that we've at least started to think about this in a structured manner, and we're able to make the business case. Perfect. Right. Lots and lots of good questions, coming in. I think the other piece that we did want to address was what's next for HR, because in this project, we had the opportunity to actually think about HR in the immediate kind of, 3 to 5 year horizon, but also we had the opportunity to think about HR beyond 1,000-day view. And this is really exciting stuff, because we had, 5 key themes, and you'll see these themes resonating based on what's happening around the world. The anxiety about losing jobs to technology. What is key is that this is not about automation and substitution. This is about human machine combinations. This is about using technology sensibly and effectively to actually do more of the dangerous work, to do more of the repetitive work, which is not stuff that we wanted to do anyway. It's so that we are able to kind of free up our bandwidth to do work that we enjoy doing and to do work that gives us meaning and is purpose driven work. The other piece is, the ethical dilemmas that come with it. With so much data that is becoming available, there are really questions to consider on how do we use employee data. We're just getting more and more of this, as we deploy more technology and making those responsible decisions, even in terms of saying how much should we track and monitor employee activities is a big responsibility and slightly different from what we're used to doing. Through that, we get to then, also looking at how do we deal with our talent. I mean, at the end of the day today, we're not just looking at employee talent. Our entire talent ecosystem has broadened. So if you think about part-time workers, you think about contingent workforce, you think about, people who might work with us through a platform, crowdsourcing. We need to think about these plurality of workforces and therefore take a view to HR processes and policies, not just from the perspective of a full-time employee. And I think this is, something many organizations are struggling with, that how do you make sure that even your contingent workforce feels engaged and feels connected to the organization? Because at the end of the day, that's linked to that purpose-driven work. I mean, as we are automating more and more work that we did not like, that is more transactional, that is more routine, we're starting to get, the time to think about what do we really want to do? What gives us joy? How do we contribute to our communities and to the society? And so being able to make sure that as we look at job redesign, like Shai mentioned earlier, we're thinking about creating more purpose-driven work. And finally, given the environment that we're in, the uncertainty, the anxiety, the fear, which has just been enhanced by the pandemic, it's really about saying, how do we drive a culture and how do we make sure that we are continuously listening and understanding what's going on in employees' minds? Funnily enough, when we did the first draft of this report, this was really going to be defining the future of HR beyond 1,000 days. I think that 1,000 days become much, much closer. I would probably say it just got cut in half, that time frame, because all of these issues are so relevant right now.
Indeed. And specifically, I know we're short of time, so we may just wrap up sort of in the next couple of minutes. But particularly this notion about driving culture, I think this is a subject that's close to our hearts because we take human capital governance as a theme very seriously. But in the foreseeable future, and may not be 1,000 days anymore, you could see evolution, you could see technology adoption in each of these 5 pillars. And I should highlight that a big thank you to the IHRP master professionals. We've done a couple of workshops with those master professionals to try to define these 5 themes. But particularly this notion about culture, I think there was this very interesting view, which Willis Towers Watson has began building out as well, that there is a possibility of a programmable culture. And if you think about that, you could actually use technology to drive certain behaviors that you want from your employees, get real-time feedback, almost like a live Uber rating or live Grab rating for all of our employees. We all walk about with a score on top of our heads, and sort of use that as a way of defining corporate culture and programming corporate culture. So emphasizing things that are important, de-emphasizing things that are less important. I mean, the applications and the possibilities are endless, and it's a really exciting time to be in HR. It's a really exciting time to sort of look at this combination between human and robotics and see how best we can evaluate the business. So kudos again to IHRP for driving some of this change, for championing some of this work. And in the interest of time, maybe I'll just do a quick shout out to close the session. First of all, as I mentioned in the beginning, and Vidisha mentioned as well, this has been a labor of love for all of us. We've been working on this report for just over a year, COVID notwithstanding, and there's been it takes a village. So there's been an absolute army sort of who's worked tirelessly for this and worked out of passion more than anything else. So I just want to mention a couple of names, Shuchi Tyagi, Jillian Tan, Ben Chua from Willis Towers Watson, but also IHRP, Mayank and Karina, Faith, Zisan, Pamela, Junquan Chu, from MOM, and Manyong Lo, Alex Teo, Jennifer Lim, and of course IHRP and the entire team. This has been an excellent partnership. We're really excited, and as Vidisha mentioned, the report would be available on different websites in October. So please feel free to access those. And we hope that you find this report useful as you look at automating and upgrading the HR function and implementing technology along with people. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to kind of confirm that, yes, we will upload the slides right after the session in the Files tab, so you should be able to pick it up from there. Thanks for letting us know that that's an option. So like Shai mentioned, you know, very, very happy and excited to be a part of this project, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or you'd like any further information. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here and for participating in this session. And have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.